everyone, welcome to the show. My name is Amanda Ostrander. I am a teacher-turned-homeschool mom, and this is Raising A to Z, a place where we talk about all things homeschooling. And today I'm going to talk about how you can tailor your kids' curriculum to fit them. One of the benefits of homeschooling is that we can customize our children's education. And that means that we can make education fit our kid and not try to shove our kids into some kind of predetermined box. And that is wonderful. That is exactly what a lot of parents are looking for when they start homeschooling. That is one of the number one reasons why homeschoolers are getting into homeschooling, especially right now. Parents who have children who are neurodiverse, who have ADHD, whose kids are maybe a little bit different. They're not fitting into the school's preconceived boxes. And so they're looking for something different. And like I said, customizing education is one of the top 5 reasons that people are homeschooling nowadays. But how exactly do we customize our curriculum for our kids? How do we tailor it to fit each child individually? It can be a little bit difficult if you're thinking in that way. Like, I've got to take this, I found a curriculum that we like. How do I make it work for every kid? It can be a little bit complicated, but it can also be a lot easier than you think. With the wonderfulness of being able to customize our children's curriculums comes the flip side of having to customize our children's curriculums. And with a lot of people not being teachers, they have no idea how to do that. They don't know how to pick up a textbook and make it easier or harder or fit their child's interests or learning styles. And that can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you are trying to do some family style learning where you're trying to do like one lesson and like teach a whole bunch of kids, even just teach 2 kids. How do you make it work? How can you take one lesson and make it work for multiple kids? How do you take one subject and make it work for multiple kids? How do you take a workbook that is maybe 90% great or 80% great, but there's a couple sections where it's just not clicking with your kids or it's a little bit too hard or too easy? What do you do in those circumstances? Do you walk away from it? Well, no, because that's a lot of money to walk away from. Right? Like, not everyone has money to buy new curriculum every time they face the smallest little hiccup in the road. So what do? We tailor it. So I'm going to give you a couple different ways that we can customize our kids' educations and tailor the curriculum for our kids that are easy, that you might not have thought of, and that, here's the secret, teachers do this all the time. So let's do it. So the first thing that we can do to customize our kids' education is to pick things that they like. Now, I'm not saying that we have to always pick what they like. Yes, sometimes you have to learn things because you have to learn them. Like, it's just part of life. But we can certainly find ways to pick topics and things that they enjoy. There's this wonderful thing that comes with being included in decisions, especially when you're a kid, and that teaching our kids that their voice and their opinions matter. And we get to do that with education. So usually we end up having like a tea time family meeting where we talk about what topics we want to do next year and what kind of novels we want to do. And yes, I will bring a selection of ideas. That doesn't mean that my selection of ideas is always chosen. Sometimes it is, because often I'm picking, I've thought of things they might like because I know my kids. But sometimes they're like, no, we're really not into that idea right now. No, thanks, Mom. And sometimes they've brought up some crazy good ideas. And I've been like, that is way better than anything I ever came up with. So that's the wonderful thing about having them there, is that they can be included in those decisions. So maybe right now they're like super into stars. We might go and pull a space unit. I have my youngest who loves animals. So some of our novel selections this year feature either main characters who are animals or are about helping animals. It made it a much easier sell. She's much more invested in the stories because it features things that she enjoys, and it makes their education more customized to them. Now, do I sometimes throw in a novel or 2 that are like totally out to left field for them? Yes, because kids don't know what they don't know. And our job as educators and as parents is to introduce them to new ideas. So yes, I don't let them pick everything, but I do let them have an opinion or a voice in some of the decisions. And I try to make decisions based on what I think they would enjoy at the time. And so we involve them in those choices and they get to pick what they like. And I know some parents are like, well, what if it's not on the book list? Like, because I have some friends who like follow different curriculum styles, Ambleside, Charlotte Mason, whatever, and they have book lists, and they're like, what if it's not on the book list? I said, it's okay. You can go through your whole life and not read a book and still be okay. So if, pick what works for your family, pick what works for your kids. You will still be a complete human, even if you don't read every single book on the Charlotte Mason book list. Like, it's okay. Sometimes the better choice is to pick a book that makes your child happy, that they connect with, and that maybe hooks them into reading something new, rather than doing something just because someone told you to, right? So that's my first suggestion. Include them in the decision making and pick what they like when possible. Then basically we get to the point where people have two questions. We've decided on something, we pulled a curriculum. It's too hard. It's like a little bit too hard. Or maybe you're doing like a family style learning, or you're doing a unit study altogether, and one of the sections is like too difficult. Or maybe it's like a grade too high for your kids and you're like, oh, I don't want to have to go look for another curriculum right now. Or I just can't afford another curriculum right now. How can we take what we've already got and make it a little bit easier? I do this stuff a lot. I do a lot of these like make things easier in our home because I kind of, when I'm picking like family style stuff, I aim for Alexi's level, which is kind of like a grade 4 level. Zoe's not there. Zoe is she's first off 2 years younger, so she's obviously not there. And she has some struggles with reading. Okay, so obviously she's not going to be able to do all the work that Alexi's doing. But I aim for Alexi when I'm kind of picking units and stuff. And then I simplify it and make it easier for Zoe. So I do this kind of stuff all the time. So I have some great suggestions for it. The first thing I do is I scribe. Scribing is essentially the child will narrate and you write down what they say word for word. For example, last year we did a short story writing assignment. She was in first grade. She, again, struggled with reading and so was having a hard time writing out what she wanted to write out because it just wasn't coming. She just can't, the idea is here, she just can't physically get it out. And so I scribed it. I sat down with a pen and a paper and she told me her story from beginning to end and I wrote every single word for word, as much as punctuation as possible that she was very obvious about. So like if she had a question, I put a question mark. If it seemed like that was the end of a sentence and she like paused and stopped, I put a period. But otherwise, like I wrote her whole story and it was like, I want to say 7 pages long. It was so long because she's rambling, right? And that's okay. Then when we went through the like editing process of like, okay, we've written our story, time to edit it, which Alexi did, which was part of the whole like writer's process. Zoe and I went through and I was like, okay, let's look at what you wrote. And we went through and we read it and we edited it and we edited it. That is a hard series of words. We got it edited down to like 2 pages. And it was, a very cute little story. She loved it. It was about a baby bunny that went on an adventure, almost got eaten by wolves, was in a tornado, but bad things happened along the way. And then she came home to her family and all was good. Whatever. It was fun. They enjoyed it, but she went through the process and was able to complete the assignment at the end. And then she was able to sit there with kind of the final draft and like type it out. She was able to do that because I had helped her do the first part, which was getting all the ideas out. So scribing can be a fantastic option, especially to simplify or make an assignment easier if you're working with kids who maybe struggle with those things. Another option that I've done with kids in school, and Alexi has done it too, is you can use text to type. So a lot of programs have text to type. It's very similar to like what I just described with scribing, but if you need the kids to kind of work a little bit more independently for a period of time, they can do their writing by talking into a computer or an iPad and it'll type it out for them. So, and then you can go back and do the next step in the editing process with them. But it does give you kind of that scribe aspect without you physically having to be right there writing it out for them. So if you have older kids who are struggling, or if you're like, I really need you guys to work on this independently for a little bit so I can do something else, it's a great option. If you have a non-reader or someone who struggles with reading and you're trying to make something easier, first off, you can read it aloud. But if you don't want to read it aloud, another great option is to get an audiobook and have them listen to it, or a read-along book. I know our library has some. I think they're called Vox books. Anyway, it's like they have like the little recording device at the beginning. And so it like reads the storybook to the kids as it goes through and they can listen to it. So you can do that with pretty much any book. You can listen to it, and if you have the physical copy right in front of them, they can follow along. Just make sure that it's the same version of both books, because sometimes one is abridged and sometimes one is a British version, and that can get really confusing because the words won't match up. But for most books, it's pretty easy to find an audiobook and a print copy, even if you get it from the library. Then they can listen and they can read along in their book, and it does make it a lot easier for them to participate in reading a book that is much higher level than what they can physically do, but they still understand the concepts. Zoe's a perfect example of this. When we do our read alouds every morning, she understands the story sometimes better than Alexi does. She understands the nuance. She understands the connections people are making. She's very good at picking up very small details. She gets a lot of the things that are happening in a story, but she just physically can't read the book yet. That's okay. We still can get her to participate because she's still picking up on plot points, on suspense, on, dropping hints. She's getting all these like big concepts, and we're just like kind of making one of the steps in the process a little bit easier for her. Another thing you can do is you can give them a smaller amount. I know this sounds like such a simple thing, but it really does make a huge difference. So for example, when we do our Brave Writer unit studies, there's copy work that the kids do every day, and all of their reading and writing assignments are based off of the copy work passage that they do in the Brave Writer for that week. Okay. And so for that, let's say it's 4 sentences. Alexi can go and write the 4 sentences. No problem. Zoe, I will pick a section. Sometimes it's 1 sentence. Sometimes it's a few words, depending on what it is. And that's her copy work for the week. And she sits there and she works on 5, 6, 7 words, and that's it. And that's okay. Sometimes you have to look at what they're doing, not just as an academic thing, but as a habit thing. And so we are definitely doing some like habit and skill building stuff rather than just, spelling, just grammar. I'm preparing her to be able to do 4 sentences in 2 years. And so by just doing the same assignment, they're doing the same work. It's the same novel study. By giving her a smaller section, it makes it easier for her. And because it's easier, she finds success, and then she's more encouraged to continue. And then the last thing you can do is help them read the assignments. I know this sounds ridiculous to some people, but like this is what people do. This is what teachers do. So for example, when we're doing a unit study, Zoe can't read all the big biology terms. Despite the fact that she loves biology, she can't read the words because they're big terms. But if I sit there and say, okay, this word says, and I sound it out and I like read it out to her, she's like, oh, I know what that is. That is this part, and this is what it does. Amazing. Or if it's like where you have to like cut it out and glue it onto the picture, wherever, like the diagram, she can do that no problem once you tell her what the word is. So that is another very simple thing that you can do, is just read it to them and help them along with it. Like if they like, yeah, does that go there? Yes, it does. Okay, let's put it in. Those are simple things that we can do to make an assignment easier. They understand the concepts. They just don't always have all of the skills to be able to do the higher level work. So we just simplify those skills. Now, what do you do if you have something and you need to make it a little more difficult? So for example, sometimes we're doing a unit or a novel study. I actually see this more in our novel studies because Lexi's a little bit advanced when it comes to her reading. And we'll be doing a novel study assignment or spelling section or whatever it is. And she is just it's just a little too easy for her. So what are things that I can do to make it a little bit harder and a little bit more challenging for her without overwhelming her? The first thing I can do is just get her to do more. So if the assignment asks for 1 paragraph, I get it to write 2. Very simple. If it's 3 sentences, I want 5. Like just adding a little bit, making it a little bit more challenging in length. It's not complicated. That's all we need to do. Another thing that we can do is we can add a skill. Let's say the spelling words are there and they're like, oh, maybe they're a little too easy. I give her an assignment where she has to go find a thesaurus and find 8 words that mean the same thing that are a little bit harder. Give her a different assignment based off of the same one. And then those become our spelling words. Or maybe she has to write a sentence using those words. So it's not just practicing your spelling words, it's using it in context this time. So very, very simple. Making something a little bit more challenging and a little bit more skill building rather than just, the straight, we're going to practice our spelling. Makes it a little bit harder, which we love. Another thing that we can do is ask more questions. I think as parents, we forget the power of questioning, and questioning is what builds curiosity, and curiosity is what solves problems in the world, right? So we can ask more questions. Just because, the textbook has 3 questions and then your kid answers them no problem, ask more. Ask things like, why? What do you think? What connections do you have to something else? Does this remind you of anything else? Those are huge questions that we can ask our kids, and we can also ask them, do you have any questions? And if they do, okay, let's go find the answer. That's a very simple way of taking something that's maybe a little bit too easy and elevating it to make it a little bit more difficult. Another thing we can do to make something a little bit harder is to ask the kids to make connections. So making a connection is when you take 2 things that are kind of related and have the kids figure out what those connections and relations are. For example, if we were reading a book about, let's say we read Nim's Island. That was a book we read earlier this year. My kids loved it. We read Nim's Island. Let's say we're talking about it and we're like, oh, like what could this connect? What does this connect to? Maybe we can make a connection to a documentary we watched about sea turtles because there's a sea turtle there. Maybe we can make a connection to a Magic School Bus episode where we were talking about volcanoes and how volcanoes are created. Maybe we can make a connection to a different book or a movie about somebody who was stranded on an island. These are things that are going to kind of help them bring in information that they know to be true, or like from like a documentary or something, into a fictional story and kind of build out what that story is and what is true, what is not true. You can discuss how like things might be like exaggerated a little bit, but you're using information from all around to make connections. Sometimes maybe you're reading a story and it'll remind them of a different story. A great example of this was Alexi. We were watching movies and we were watching, what was it? Raya and the Last Dragon. Okay. Raya has to go and find all the pieces of the crystal that's been hidden all over her, all over the country, right? And Alexi gets to the end and she goes, Mom, do you realize that Raya and the Last Dragon is the exact same storyline as Trolls 2? I said, what are you talking about? She goes, it's the same storyline. It's a girl has to travel throughout the land to collect all the things, which Poppy goes out and gets all the strings. Raya is going out to collect all the pieces of the crystals to bring them together to save her country. Yeah, you're right. They are the same story. And then we can talk about how there are that is a very common trope and a very common thing in stories. And we looked at other stories. So making connections is huge. And it's a very simple way to make an assignment more difficult. Can you find a connection somewhere else? The last thing we can do to make something a little bit more challenging is to ask them to present it in a different way. So for example, let's say you have an assignment and the assignment is they need to make a poster about an animal. Perhaps, I might have Zoe make a poster about an animal. That's great. That's at her level. She draws a picture, she puts some information. Amazing. It would probably be about koalas, being honest, because that's her obsession right now. But then for Lexi, I say, okay, you have to make the poster. I also want you to make a slideshow. Or I want you to make it into like a movie or like a WWF, commercial. tell me more about this animal, make a mini animal documentary, like something like that. And then she can take what is a simple project and then build on it in terms of different skills. So maybe it's going to be learning a new program. Maybe it's going to be doing some more research. Maybe it's going to be using her camera, doing some editing. There's all different things that she can do to make a different final project that'll be maybe a little bit more at her level, rather than just sticking with like the basic assignment that's in the curriculum. So those are my tips on how to tailor curriculum to your child. I hope that it's helpful. If you have other tips or things that you do to customize curriculum for your kids, please leave them below. Let's share the love, share the information. I'm sure it'll help a lot of other homeschoolers. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe and follow along. Consider becoming a member of the Happy Homeschoolers Club here at Raising A to Z. And make sure you follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you so much, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.